The gentle clatter of silverware meeting porcelain resonated through the air, the most prominent sound amidst the steady and courteous exchange of words at the table. My husband occupied the head of the table, engaged in a discussion about interest rates and property taxes with his brother. The latter appeared only partially engaged, his gaze wandering toward me on several occasions, subtle, never direct, but enough for my body to sense it before my mind could fully register. I selected that dress with intention, a deep green hue, long sleeves, yet tailored just right to evoke a sense of personal ownership, not merely a garment for the evening meal. Beneath the lace, hidden from view, lay a choice made in solitude while I groomed my hair, feigning indifference to the fact that I had adorned my collarbone with a fragrance I hadn't embraced in years. There was no genuine tension between them. My husband and his brother shared a harmonious relationship. They possessed a distinctiveness that kept competition at bay, yet shared enough common ground to comfortably embrace their mutual silences. My husband was calm, deliberate, consistently processing feelings with reason. His brother, in contrast, gestured animatedly, cracked jokes that stung just a bit too much, and remained unapologetic in moments of quiet. Following dinner, my husband stepped away to take a late call upstairs. I collected the plates, the action so ingrained in me that it required no conscious thought. His brother trailed behind me into the kitchen, propping himself against the doorway while I transferred leftovers into a container. "You always make things look easy," he remarked, not as a compliment, not entirely permitted, more as a mere observation. I hesitated to turn around, my hands moving with a deliberate slowness. "What items?" "All of it," he remarked, a gentle lift of his shoulders echoing in his tone. "Evening meal," beaming, maintaining composure. I found myself at a loss for words in response to that. I dried my hands on a towel and turned to confront him. He maintained his gaze, and that was what set him apart. My husband consistently averted his gaze, either focusing on the ground, glancing at his watch, or fixating on a screen. His brother's gaze swept over me, taking in my face, my body, my posture. It was as if I were facing a mirror that penetrated beneath the surface of my being. He entered the room completely, moving just a few feet nearer. The space that separated us stayed unchanged, yet it seemed to have grown more delicate. I extended my hand toward a wine glass, only to discover it was already spotless and dry. "Do you require assistance with something?" he inquired. "No," I said, my voice rising too quickly, then softened. "Thank you. I have it figured out." He nodded, yet remained still. For a fleeting moment, I envisioned taking a single step closer, just one. What might unfold? Would he draw closer? Would I allow him? The idea smoldered within me, igniting a gradual flame. Not out of desire, not at this moment, but due to the mere possibility of it. That was sufficient to cause my hands to quiver just a bit as I extended them toward the dishcloth. "I should get going," he said at last, pushing himself off the counter. I nodded, my gaze lingering on the floor for far too long. "Thank you for being here." He departed in silence, leaving no further words behind. The door clicked shut behind him, a soft yet definitive sound. As I settled into bed that night, I found my husband already lost in slumber. I observed him for some time, his recognizable silhouette, his arm gracefully resting over the pillow. I climbed into bed, hair unbrushed, still clad in that green dress. I reflected on how his brother had articulated everything. In the future, I pondered, would he utter those words once more? Would I respond in another way? Something subtle had changed tonight, an unseen weight that lingered in the air, and I could sense it poised for the next chapter. For days later, I encountered him once more. It was unexpected. I ventured to the hardware store by myself. My husband found himself in yet another virtual meeting that, as usual, stretched into the evening hours. He would dismiss me with a vague nod whenever I inquired if he wished to come along. I found myself in the store, searching for light fixtures to adorn the upstairs hallway, a home detail that appeared to matter only to me. As I stood before a line of matte black sconces, examining the nuanced variations in their finishes, A voice suddenly broke the silence from behind me. Do you genuinely believe that any of these will have an impact? I turned, and there he stood, his brother, once more leaning, once more watching. He wasn't dressed in a suit like my husband. Instead, he wore a faded gray t-shirt and jeans, his hands casually tucked in his pockets, exuding a relaxed presence that stood in stark contrast to every man I'd encountered throughout the week. I reminded myself to maintain a neutral and light approach. There are those among us who continue to hold a deep appreciation for atmosphere. His smile curled at the edge, a subtle twist of mischief. Your taste has always been impeccable. We strolled through the aisles side by side, our gazes rarely meeting. He never inquired about my solitary presence. I did not extend an offer. We stayed a bit too long in front of the kitchen faucets, engaging in soft conversation about trivial matters, brands, materials, and the ridiculous cost of drawer handles. It had a sense of familiarity, strangely personal. It struck me as more personal than any recent night spent in our home. As we emerged into the late afternoon sun, a heaviness had settled in the air. I sensed it, a texture woven into the space between us. We strolled toward our vehicles, his positioned a few spaces away from mine, almost as if by design, and paused just before uttering our farewells. He gazed at me then, truly gazed, not in the typical manner men do, but as if he were perusing a text he had encountered before yet still found elusive in its meaning. His hand grazed my elbow, intentional yet subtle, neither demanding a response nor entirely casual. It was a trial, and I remained steadfast. I realize that now. Yet in that moment, it seemed that retreating would have been the true deception. I have taken on various roles recently organized, efficient, polite, but I have not been truthful, not with myself. He moved in a little nearer, just the right amount. I paused, breath caught in my throat. Cars whizzed by, pedestrians strolled along, and the vast world continued its relentless rhythm. Yet, in our shared space, time seemed to pause, calm and unwavering. He bent down slowly, with a gentle intent, and pressed his lips to mine. It lacked the grandeur of a film. Silence enveloped them, filled only with the warmth of lips against skin, the rhythm of breath, and the unsettling serenity of discovering a longing that had gone unnoticed until now. His hand lingered at the edge of my hip, not clutching, merely present. A warmth unfurled beneath my ribs, a sensation both ancient and fresh simultaneously. I allowed it to unfold, just for 3, perhaps 4 seconds, before I took a step back. I should go, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with uncertainty. He offered no resistance, merely inclined his head slightly and observed as I made my way to my car. I pushed the door open, took a seat, and it was only at that moment that I noticed my hands were shaking. I lingered for a moment before driving away. I lingered in the driver's seat, the keys poised in the ignition, gazing blankly through the windshield at the void beyond. My lips still tingled, not from pressure or passion, but because a door had been unlocked. Not a scar, but an entrance, and doors, once opened, may not remain shut forever. That evening, I chose not to mention the light fixtures to my husband. I kept everything to myself. He was engaged in a phone call throughout dinner, coordinating arrangements for yet another conference in a different city. I gathered the plates, neatly refolded the napkins, and wiped down the counter twice. As I made my way upstairs, I took my time undressing, selecting a delicate set of lingerie that had been tucked away for months. Hidden from the world, it's all about the sensation of silk caressing the skin. Just to remind myself I remained present, beneath the monotony. In the mirror, I appeared unrepentant. I felt alert, and I was certain our paths would cross once more. It began with a sense of simplicity, as is the case with many such occurrences. That's the narrative I crafted for myself. A few nights following the kiss, my husband and I settled next to each other on the couch, engrossed in the playback of a recent family gathering. The concept originated with me, a collective effort to achieve a shared goal. a term that had transformed into a relic of nostalgia rather than a living reality in our union. He grasped the remote casually in one hand, deftly bypassing the dull segments with an almost surgical accuracy, pausing now and then to highlight a humorous quip or an uncomfortable moment from a background character. I nodded and laughed at the appropriate moments, yet my attention was not truly on the screen. I found myself in a state of anticipation. I was unaware of its purpose until I laid eyes on it. A fleeting instant. It lasted barely 5 seconds, perhaps even less. As the barbecue unfolded, the camera, gripped by another, swept across the yard, capturing the lively scene. Conversations flow, drinks clutched tightly, children darting joyfully across the green expanse. Then the lens captured us, him and me, his brother. We found ourselves by the grill, slightly distanced from the rest. I was speaking, chuckling, and leaning a bit in his direction. His hand grazed my lower back as he leaned in nearer, and I made no move to retreat. The motion was delicate, yet on the screen, amidst the quiet of that recording, it appeared profoundly intimate. It appeared to be something. My stomach tightened as the clip went by. My husband remained unresponsive. He remained silent, offering no reflections. Perhaps he overlooked it, or perhaps he acknowledged it and chose to categorize it as not worth the trouble of a confrontation. That was his manner, evasion cloaked in the guise of forbearance. He transitioned to the following scene. I fixated on the still image in my thoughts, observing the outline of my figure tilting just a fraction closer to another man. It didn't shout betrayal, but it murmured it, like a secret too well known to be conceived. After he had ascended the stairs to tackle yet another work email, I lingered behind, sifting through the photos from that day. I discovered a cropped, candid shot featuring both of us in the background. I stood near the grill, one hand resting under my chin as laughter bubbled up, while he stood beside me, his body angled toward mine. Though our bodies remained apart, the silence in the air spoke volumes. The truth was revealed not through presence, but rather through the lack of distance. I secured my phone and placed it to the side. My heart had found a calm, consistent pulse, akin to a soft drum echoing in a deserted chamber. That night, I dreamt in vivid hues, each color a nuance of tension, every image a partially realized silhouette of desire. The next day, he was silent. Silence reigns, and uninvited guests are absent. I caught myself staring out the window more frequently, almost as if I were waiting for his car to unexpectedly roll into the driveway. When it failed to happen, I persuaded myself that perhaps it was the end. Perhaps the kiss was merely a spontaneous gesture, fueled by the moment, by closeness, by the lingering pain of emotional absence. Perhaps we had both sensed the boundary and chose not to breach it once more. Yet my phone suddenly illuminated, displaying a message, no salutation, no emojis, merely a line that I found myself reading thrice before responding. Do you recall the hue of your dress on that day? I certainly did. Deep emerald, extended sleeves, delicate lace beneath. I took my time to respond. I shut my eyes, conjured his voice uttering the words, the faint smile dancing on his lips, the way he inclined his head while anticipating a reply. I typed at a leisurely pace. Indeed, do you? 3 dots flickered briefly, then fell silent. He remained silent, yet there was no necessity for a response. We were engaged in a quiet conversation. I was unaware that he would be moving in. I wasn't informed beforehand. It emerged with a sense of nonchalance, as if it were of little consequence. My husband set his coffee cup down on the table, casually noting that his brother required a place to stay for a few days while the electricians tended to his house. Naturally, he will remain here. Who else is there? He continued, already midway through opening his laptop, oblivious to the way my breath hitched for just a moment too long. It held no deceit, no intricate schemes, merely a straightforward approach, reason and effectiveness, my husband's method. Yet a knot formed within me, the thought of him, his brother, resting beneath our roof, traversing the same corridor, the sound of the shower echoing, brushing past me in the kitchen at dawn. It stirred a mix of unease and exhilaration within me. That day, I avoided the mirror not out of dread for my reflection, but from the worry that I might appear completely innocent. I was apprehensive about appearing too enthusiastic. He showed up with a modest suitcase and a toolbox, ready for any repairs that might be needed around the house, he remarked, his tone tinged with a hint of regret. He appeared transformed, with a neatly trimmed beard, a crisp shirt, and eyes that were both calm and watchful. He didn't gaze at me directly, not overtly, yet every action he took felt calibrated to capture my focus, as if he was challenging me to pay attention. The initial evening felt nearly intolerable. The three of us shared a meal, enjoyable, unremarkable, easily overlooked at first glance. Conversations about the neighborhood alarms blaring, the weekend forecast, and a humorous remark from a colleague. Nothing out of the ordinary, yet everything felt charged with significance. Each look exchanged across the table, particularly his, seemed to carry weight. He rarely smiled, avoided flirting, yet his gaze lingered just long enough. Once dinner was over, my husband took his leave to complete a report upstairs. I lingered in the kitchen, drying off clean dishes that were already dry. His brother hung back at the doorway, resting his shoulder against the frame. We were quiet, not in a way that suggested unease, but rather in a manner that thrummed with an unarticulated understanding, something that lingered in the air between us. He inquired whether there was anything in the house that I had been intending to repair. His voice carried a relaxed tone, as if he were inquiring about the day's forecast. I nodded and pointed out the bathroom cabinet. The hinge had been wobbly for months. He trailed behind me as I ascended the stairs. I moved forward, acutely conscious of each footfall trailing behind me. The sound of his breathing reached my ears, a steady cadence, slightly deeper than usual. As I swung the bathroom door open, he followed me and without hesitation. The space was tight, intimate, featuring a sizable mirror that captured our images perfectly. The light enveloped the scene in a warm, gentle glow, softening the edges of reality. He knelt low to scrutinize the cabinet. I lingered in his shadow, arms crossed, feigning interest in the tiles beneath my feet, as my heart thudded relentlessly against my chest. As he rose once more, our gazes intertwined in the reflection. Silence enveloped us. I remained in my fitted, sleeveless house dress. My hair, still damp from a recent shower, clung gently to my collarbone. I didn't bother to brush it out, not because I forgot, but because I simply didn't want to. He returned the screwdriver to the box, yet remained still, not making any move to depart. We gazed at one another through the mirror. The distance between us transformed into something ethereal, weightless, and filled with unspoken tension. He advanced, a single deliberate step, probing the boundary, poised to see if I would cross it. I neither did that, nor did I cross it. The atmosphere surrounding us shimmered delicately, like a fragile filament. He lingered near, the warmth of him radiating against my back, yet remaining just out of reach. "I can sense your tremors," he murmured, his tone calm and steady, "even in your stillness." I remained silent, and then he walked away. I lingered, gazing at the image that mirrored my essence. My skin still recalled the void he had occupied. The gaze he cast upon me lingered in my mind, while my breath, caught in a moment, finally escaped, resonating in the silence around us. Something had commenced, quietly and without fanfare, yet undeniably irreversible. The invitation was extended by my husband, a mere suggestion tossed out during breakfast, casual and thoughtless in a manner only someone blissfully oblivious could achieve. He had come across the idea that a weekend by the lake might restore balance to the nervous system. We had access to a family friend's cabin, seldom utilized during the season, just distant enough to evoke a sense of escape, yet near enough to avoid the hassle of a grand outing. "You, me, and my brother," he said, pausing to take a sip of his coffee. "Let's go get some fresh air." I can't recall my response, something bland and evasive, yet the instant he spoke, I sensed a chill trickle down my spine. Not quite fear, but a mix of anticipation, dread, and thrill coursing through me. On Friday afternoon, we set off, the car brimming with sweaters, wine, and an abundance of items we likely wouldn't need. I settled into the passenger seat, shades in place, feigning interest in messages that never came. His brother occupied the rear seat. His gaze lingered in the rearview mirror, a constant presence that buzzed softly against my neck. I averted my gaze from him. The cabin stood unadorned and angular, nestled among the towering pine trees, featuring a modest deck that offered a view of the shimmering water. Within, the atmosphere was infused with the scent of aged timber and a subtle sweetness, perhaps reminiscent of lavender. I chose the bedroom that overlooks the lake. They accepted it without hesitation. The initial evening faded into a haze. Charred delights, refreshing sips, and meandering dialogues around the flickering flames. I observed their conversation, two men with similar builds yet contrasting vibes. My husband elaborated on his work, animatedly gesturing with the bottle in hand, while his brother reclined, arms crossed, casting glances in my direction when he believed I was unaware. As my husband stepped inside to fetch the jackets, we remained outside, beneath a sky marred by a multitude of stars. "You're quiet," he remarked, not in a gentle tone, but in a manner meant only for her ears. "I'm doing well." He didn't confront the falsehood, merely allowed it to linger in the air between us, reminiscent of clothes left unattended on a line. That night, our words fell silent once more. The following day arrived with a chill that caught everyone off guard. We wrapped ourselves in cozy sweaters and strolled along the lakeshore. My husband strolled ahead, stopping occasionally to capture images of trees and water, as well as light patterns that appeared intriguing only through the eyes of someone who seemed disinterested. His brother and I trailed behind, deliberately moving at a leisurely pace, exchanging few words. Upon arriving at a serene clearing by the water's edge, he came to a halt. "I can't continue to do this in a half-hearted way," he stated. The words struck with the force of a fist against the heart. I faced him, my breath suspended in a tumult of frustration and longing. "Do you really believe this is the midpoint?" I inquired. His response arrived with unwavering certainty. "Indeed, it falls short." I found myself at a loss for words. Every part of me thrummed with energy. Fear grips the mind. Desire. The unfathomable calculations of choice. Before I had the chance to overthink, he moved closer. One step, then another. His hand found mine, gently resting, not seizing, merely embracing. My fingers instinctively curled around his. He gazed at me, neither seeking approval nor uttering a word, simply poised for the revelation of honesty. "I assure you, I spoke the truth." Our lips met in a gentle embrace. It wasn't the first time, yet it seemed as though it was. Deliberate, unhurried, and intentional. It was selected. Pine needles crunched beneath my feet, the wind tousled my hair, and his taste lingered on my lips. A moment devoid of theatrics, free from any need for excuses. As we separated, I remained close, not taking a step back. We made our way back on our own. I was the first to arrive, feigning a chill as I cozied up in a blanket by the warm glow of the fireplace. My husband offered me a cup of tea, his gaze averted from my face. He discussed the arrangements for dinner. I acknowledged, sipped, and grinned at the appropriate times. As the night deepened, I found myself lying in bed, my back turned to the window. My husband lay beside me, softly snoring, completely oblivious. Outside, beyond the curtain, I caught sight of a cigarette's glow, flaring briefly before it vanished into the night. He remained wide awake. I felt the same way. Neither of us felt inclined to surrender to sleep. Returning home ought to have resolved all matters. A weekend such as that, where boundaries were not merely crossed but intentionally traversed, ought to have instilled in us a sense of caution, perhaps even fear. I ought to have experienced a pang of guilt in the passenger seat of the car, observing the trees blur by the window, my husband softly humming to an old playlist. I ought to have glanced in the rearview mirror and noticed an unfamiliar face in the back seat. However, I did not. Instead, I experienced an unusual clarity, as if something long dormant within me had awakened and was determined not to return to slumber. Clarity had finally settled in regarding the events that unfolded. I had complete confidence in my decision. The sole ambiguity remaining was the timing and manner of its recurrence. Upon returning home, the rhythm of everyday life unfolded with a dramatic flourish. My husband went back to his desk, to his calls, to his spreadsheets. He remained oblivious, or perhaps he was aware, yet deliberately opted to inhabit his own interpretation of the narrative. A place where everything remained whole. A scene where his wife beamed with joy, preparing meals and inquiring about his day. And I smiled. I did inquire. I took the time to reorganize our closet, ensuring that my coziest sweaters were front and center. I acquired a new fragrance, one that exudes warmth, featuring hints of amber and a subtle bitterness. On a Monday morning, I took the time to shave my legs. Not due to any pressing obligation, but rather because I simply couldn't bear the absence of that gentle softness against my own sheets. He didn't reach for me that week, neither in bed nor in passing moments. I started to understand that the physical absence I had previously attributed to stress or distraction was merely a pattern he had grown accustomed to. Intimacy had turned into a scheduled event, one that continually faced delays. Still, my skin recalled the sensation of his brother's hand resting on my waist, as if I were something precious, deserving of more than just a fleeting moment. Our exchanges were sparse, merely a word here and there. There, awakened. Thursday. It sufficed. I discovered methods to disappear when the moment called for it. A trip to the pharmacy, an imaginary meeting, a drive through unfamiliar neighborhoods. He accepted it without a second thought. He engaged in his own meetings, characterized by hushed microphones and inscrutable faces. On that Thursday, I mentioned that I had a dentist appointment. He found me by the community park, the one where the walking path gracefully slipped behind a curtain of trees, hidden from the street's gaze. We exchanged no words as we crossed paths, merely walking together, side by side, until we arrived at a bench that had been partially consumed by ivy. I took a seat. He rose to his feet. "I wasn't certain you would show up," he remarked. I raised my gaze. "I nearly refrained, yet you took the leap." His voice lacked triumph. It was silent, as if he understood the price I had paid. I wrapped my coat more snugly around myself, acutely conscious of the wind caressing my bare wrists. He extended his hand, gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with the soft sweep of his fingers. That subtle gesture carried a depth of intimacy surpassing any kiss. That day, it amounted to nothing. We left it at that. Yet it was the first moment I understood that we didn't require the pretext of longing. The excitement had faded away. It was about acknowledgement, a gaze penetrating the facade you attempted to maintain, unwavering and attentive. That evening, my husband brought up the possibility of having to travel again in the near future. He averted his gaze as he spoke those words. I didn't inquire about the location. He pressed his lips gently to my forehead before I drifted off to sleep. It was soft, recognizable, and empty. I remained awake long after he drifted off, my body curled inward, attuned to the ticking of the hallway clock, the soft drip from the bathroom faucet, the wind tapping at the window as if it held secrets unknown to anyone else. And I realized this was far from over. Not at this moment. The error lay not in the deed itself. It flowed with the cadence. We had slipped into a pattern that felt somewhat like routine. Hushed gatherings, deliberate pauses, concise notes crafted without any marks. It was neither love nor a mere fling. It existed in that perilous realm between desire and recollection, an entity we neither articulated nor attempted to hinder. And then I lost my footing. It occurred on a Tuesday in the late morning hours. I found myself caught up in a whirlwind of emails, grocery lists, and unfinished tasks. My husband was up on a call. In the kitchen, with my phone in hand, a message from him suddenly appeared. Only a pair of words. "May I?" I failed to consider. I responded with a tap. Indeed, the back doors are open. I accidentally sent it to the wrong thread. The moment I pressed send, it dawned on me. My stomach felt like an empty void. I reopened the chat, my husband's name shining at the top, clear and undeniable. I remained motionless, phone clutched tightly, every fiber of my being alive with anxiety. For a fleeting moment, I thought about reaching for the phone, deleting the message, and acting as if it had never occurred. However, the moment had passed. A moment later, the red receipt appeared. He remained upstairs, not making his way down. I perched on the edge of the dining room chair, anticipation coursing through me as I listened intently. The floor above me groaned softly, his voice trailing off as he completed a thought into the headset, leaving a hush in its wake. Yet, he remained up there. That evening, he chose not to bring up the message, neither during dinner nor afterward. He refrained from showing any anger. He behaved in a completely ordinary manner. He was remarkably attentive, inquiring if I enjoyed the meal, asking if I'd like to watch something later, and even giving my shoulder a gentle touch as he moved past to the sink. It was that unsettling calm that filled me with dread. It signified that he was deep in thought. It signified that a change had occurred within him, even if he refused to acknowledge it. As the evening wore on and I was folding laundry in the bedroom, he entered silently, without uttering a single word. He rested against the doorframe, arms folded across his chest. I continued to fold. He observed me for a moment and remarked, "You've been quieter lately." I kept my gaze downwards, feeling quite exhausted. About myself. It was not expressed with malice. It lacked any hint of accusation, merely straightforward, as if he was already aware of the truth. I chose not to reply. Silence offered a refuge. He exited the room shortly after, and I remained there, clutching one of his shirts. The fragrance of his cologne barely clung to the fabric. It once brought a sense of solace. Now it seemed like a recollection. Once, it held significance. Now merely hanging on out of routine. That night he kissed me, not driven by desire, but by something deeper. Perhaps it's a matter of possession, or perhaps it's rooted in apprehension. Or perhaps a desire to demonstrate that he was still capable. His lips held a warmth that felt so familiar. Yet, my body remained unresponsive. I allowed it to unfold, driven by compassion, remorse, or a sense of surrender. I was uncertain about which one to choose. In the stillness that followed, I found myself gazing at the ceiling, enveloped in darkness, his arm resting on me, both a weight and a reminder of his absence. And I experienced a void. Only the burden of his silence and the burden of my own remained. I sensed that the other one remained alert in the darkness beyond. I had yet to respond to his previous message. "Are you all right?" I chose not to respond, yet he would understand. He had an uncanny ability to sense whenever there was a shift within me. And tonight, something had shifted, not due to being discovered, but rather because I had lost clarity on whom I was concealing myself from. He arrived the following morning unexpectedly. Silence, no communication. A sudden, precise knock echoed against the seldom-used side door. The sound echoed from the hallway, and I stood still, paralyzed. A towel envelopes my damp hair while the robe clings to my skin. My husband departed early for a meeting. The home lingered with warmth and the refreshing aroma of citrus shampoo. With a gentle push, I eased the door open. There he stood. His gaze traversed my features, devoid of any salutation, as though the stillness was a component of an unvoiced pact. "You didn't respond," he remarked. I was unable to do so. I responded. He gave a nod and entered the room. We were both aware of the nature of this, even if we left it unnamed. I motioned toward the living room, yet we chose not to enter. Instead, we found ourselves in the corridor that lay between the kitchen and the stairs, a space that perpetually exuded an air of incompleteness. A box of light bulbs rested against a scuff on the wall I had yet to paint over, a snapshot of the everyday chaos that comes with a life still unfolding. He rested against the wall, arms folded across his chest. I leaned away from him, my arms crossed as well. We lingered in that moment, two mirrored images of a dilemma we had yet to confront. "I'm pretty sure he knows," I murmured softly. His jaw tightened, yet there was no hint of astonishment in his eyes. "Will it make a difference?" I confessed, unsure of the answer. The atmosphere surrounding us grew dense once more, reminiscent of that initial evening in the kitchen when a mere look held more significance than a physical connection. In that moment, the weight felt tangible, pressing down on the very air around us. We had stopped the pretense. "I can't approach this in a half-hearted way," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He propelled himself away from the wall and advanced forward. I remained still. I sought to advance, not in retreat, but in pursuit. Every part of my body throbbed with a yearning I had yet to acknowledge, neither lust nor affection. Something ancient, something that had lingered in the shadows for far too long. It began to sprout teeth. He extended his hand, resting it gently on my waist, a gesture of reassurance rather than force. His thumb glided gently across the fabric of the robe, not tugging, merely outlining its contours. "I didn't come here to pressure you," he stated. "I arrived here because I had to see you." And somehow that felt even worse, because it lacked the spontaneity. It was not the rush of adrenaline. It was carefully considered. It was sincere. We lingered in that moment, perhaps for an eternity, or just a fleeting instant. The tranquility was shattered by a distant noise, the rumble of a car gliding by, accompanied by the sharp bark of a dog from 2 houses away. Yet, the realm within that corridor remained unchanged. Not at this moment. At last, I broke free, not out of desire, but necessity. I took a step back, allowing myself a moment to catch my breath once more. "I insisted that you should leave." My voice trembled, yet remained resolute. He nodded, neither angry nor hurt, simply accepting. "I'll wait," he said before turning, "even if I don't know what I'm waiting for." As the door clicked shut behind him, I collapsed onto the floor, my back pressed against the wall, knees pulled tightly to my chest. The tile pressed against me, its chill seeping into my skin. My robe had slipped slightly open, yet I chose not to adjust it. I was indifferent. Versions of myself were colliding in a chaotic whirlwind, each vying for attention all at once. A woman navigates the complexities of her role as a wife, grappling with desire intertwined with guilt, all while memories linger in the shadows of her mind. I found myself uncertain about which one to cling to now. As the day unfolded, I stumbled upon a note tucked away in my bag. I did not observe him put it there. It lay folded with precision, almost excessively so, as if he lacked the confidence to voice the words that lingered unspoken. "You're the first thing that has awakened me from my daze." I went through it 3 times again. Then I carefully placed it in the back of my lingerie drawer, nestled between silks that had long been forgotten and lace that had recently made a comeback for reasons I preferred to keep to myself. And that night, when my husband reached for me in bed, softly, cautiously, like someone attempting to mend a fragile thing without understanding its flaws, I allowed him to do so. I allowed him to make contact with me. For a fleeting moment, I attempted to convince myself that I could still slip away into a version of me that hadn't yet made the choice of someone else. He extended an invitation for a journey. My spouse, I mean. It lacked extravagance. Nothing that screams tropical or looks like it belongs on a postcard. A simple weekend getaway. Perhaps coastal. The gentle embrace of ocean air and the serenity of tranquil walks beckon with a soothing allure. He brought it up during dinner, casually suggesting we grab some wine on the way back, as though we were merely planning a quick trip rather than an escape from the city. "We could make good use of the time," he remarked. "Only the 2 of us." I nodded, almost instinctively, as I chewed a mouthful of salad that had inexplicably lost all flavor. The notion ought to have brought me solace. A simple act, a journey back to the known. Yet it was akin to receiving a snapshot of a person from my past. The days preceding the trip dragged on interminably. I gathered a compact bag, choosing functional attire, keeping makeup to a minimum, and included a single set of lingerie that I was certain I wouldn't use. My movements were cautious, intentional, as if I were gearing up for a performance that I had lost the passion to practice. He appeared more buoyant, or perhaps simply filled with hope. In the car, he played the same playlist we once cherished, back when the silence between us was filled with warmth rather than heaviness. He highlighted familiar landmarks, recounted tales I had encountered previously, and I chuckled at the appropriate moments. Subsequently, we strolled beside the water's edge. He extended his hand towards mine. I allowed him to proceed. His fingers radiated warmth, a sense of familiarity enveloping me. They neither excited me nor disgusted me. That was the issue at hand. I had mastered the art of deception. In the room once more, we enjoyed a serene dinner together. The candles danced gently, illuminating his features as he shared his thoughts on work, the changes he was contemplating, and the deeper reflections that had occupied his mind recently. He kept his thoughts to himself. I did not inquire. That night, he reached for me once more, not with haste, but with a gentle caress, as if he still held on to the hope that softness could soften the barriers that distance had forged. I reacted in the manner I had conditioned myself to, softly, just enough to appease the situation, but not enough to yield to it. As he drifted into slumber, I nestled on my side, gazing out the window, observing the curtains dance gently in the breeze. And I came to understand that this endeavor, this struggle, it wasn't insincere. It simply fell short, not any longer. As dawn broke, I slipped into my clothes softly, careful not to disturb his slumber. Casual denim, a gentle cotton top, hair pulled back. I packed with care, taking my time with each item. My phone vibrated softly. Only a number, etched in my mind, devoid of any name. "Are you doing all right?" I remained silent, not out of a lack of desire to engage, but rather because the meaning of okay had become unclear to me. Upon our return, the house seemed to remain exactly as we had left it. The corridor lingered with a subtle aroma of coffee mingled with dust. The light in the bathroom continued to flicker. I moved through the room at a deliberate pace, reminiscent of a person revisiting a space they once cherished, now feeling like an outsider in their own kitchen. I slid open the drawer in the bedroom, retrieving the note he had left for me, carefully tucked away amidst the delicate lace and soft silk. I opened it up, perused the words once more. "You're the first thing that has awakened me from my daze." I lingered in that moment, lost in thought. With a deliberate motion, I approached the window and gazed outside. There he stood. Across the street, outside the neighboring house, he hunched over a cardboard box, feigning the act of unpacking. His shirt adhered to his back. He had rolled up his sleeves. He kept his gaze down, but it was unnecessary, for I was already in motion, fully awake and aware.